So this is the BFA winter exhibition little artist talk session that we're doing. Y'all know me, I'm Ruth, VU Gallery Director. And yeah, we're just gonna kind of hang out for a bit, talk about your work and what you've been doing. Ryan, did you wanna introduce yourself and the program and talk about that at all?
Yeah, sure. Well, I wish there were more people here. Oh, Pierre is here. Wonderful. But I really do want to thank you, Ruth, for all of your patience with us and your support. I know that the second shutdown happened as we were installing, and I think you were incredibly calm and collected in a very chaotic situation. So big, round of applause for Ruth. Thank you for your help.
Thank you.
I am the BFA coordinator for this year, and my name is Ryan Kelly. I teach in the Department of Art and Art History. I oversee the ceramics area and teach predominantly our 3D foundations course, in addition to some of our other upper level courses. And this year we kind of rotate the duty of who helps to coordinate this BFA program. And let me pull up my prepared comments so I don't misspeak. A bit about the WWU Studio BFA program. The Art and Art History Department's Bachelor of Fine Arts degree, or BFA in Studio, is an additional degree on top of the Studio BA degree that most of our students graduate with. It is a competitive cohort of usually up to 12 students. This year, we only have 9 of very talented people. Depending on the discipline and the space available, we do try and give each of these students the use of a private individual studio space, in addition to privileged access to the normal departmental facilities and resources. Again, that is kind of discipline specific. Like down in ceramics, I don't have a lot of space. So we do have a weird little cubby that gets kind of shared with some of the upper level people. But we do have additional private studios. The cohort meets on a weekly basis in a kind of critique seminar format with the BFA coordinator and with each other, and develop a rapport and come together as a group over the course of 3 quarters. In addition to that, they also work with a committee of at least 2 tenured studio faculty, kind of intimately over the course of each quarter. And at the end of each quarter, submit work for a end of quarter review and kind of track the building of that body of work over the course of the academic year. And the big thing is, this is a program that is here to to help prepare students to build an independent and professional body of work that is beyond what might come out of assignment-based coursework. And that culminates in a group exhibition at the Western Gallery in the spring that is also accompanied by a catalog and other promotional materials. Okay, that was my prepared notes. And I would just like to introduce the folks that are part of the BFA program. Again, we have 9 very talented, very different individuals working in different disciplines, many of them with overlapping interests and interests in media as well. We have Eli Eisenhower, Ellie Minagawa, Mads Mosier, Brittany Pincus, Parisa Rad, Sophia Rocca, Alan Rogers, Colton Sampson, and Nathan Wilkinson. And I should say some of them are, unfortunately, there is a bit of a class conflict right now. They will be joining us. Some of those folks will be joining us a little later in the meeting when they're able to get out of class. But I think maybe I should give it a rest and turn it back over to you, Ruth, unless you have some questions or comments.
No, that was great. Thank you. Yeah, I love seeing all of the BFA stuff every year. It's very fun. So yeah, so this show right now is kind of the interim, like, stop checkpoint until you guys get to the Western Gallery big spring exhibition, which is very exciting. But yeah, thank you for introducing the program, and I'm excited to be joined later by the rest of our group. But yeah, without further ado, we should just get started, I think.
Sounds good to me.
Sweet. Okay. I'm just gonna go by the order of people I see on my screen. So Sophia, that means you're up. Sorry, you have to go first.
No worries.
Before I start asking you questions, did you want to share your work? I know Ryan mentioned that you had like an interactive thing you wanted to share.
Yes, yeah. I would like to share my website. So if it's possible to share my screen, I will do that.
Yeah, do you want to go ahead and test that out? I
Yeah.
can see if I need to fix something.
Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay, I'll probably leave this up here, or I could stop sharing, whichever you prefer.
That's totally up to you.
I'll probably just leave it up.
Okay.
Yeah. So how should we start? Should I introduce myself?
Yeah, so go ahead and introduce yourself. And then my first question is, what kind of art do you make? So you can just go ahead and start talking about that.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, hi, I'm Sophia. I'm in my 4th year in the BFA program, and I work in the medium like animation. I also do illustration, but my main focus is 2D animation. Yeah. And
Great. Oh, sorry.
yeah, no. That's all I was gonna say. I was just gonna ask what's the follow-up question.
Cool. Okay. So I was going to ask what your work process is like. How do you get started and where do you go from there?
Yeah, that is a very good question. So, not to overwhelm myself, I try to take one step at a time. And so with this project, I'm, making a whole collection of GIFs, hopefully roughly 100, but we'll see if we can complete that by the end of the year. But what I like to do is I start by, creating my concept one at a time. And then I would sketch out and draw it out and actually start the process of animating. And then I do have to troubleshoot a few things after putting them all together, seeing how they look. And yeah, just a lot of experimenting, having to put all these GIFs together in a cohesive way and not making it be so like one overpowers another GIF. So I want to keep everything balanced, but also a little overwhelming because, my whole project is just about my life and how crazy it can be.
So the piece that we're looking at right now, is this one GIF or is this a culmination of like a bunch of different pieces that you've put together?
Yeah, so this, I'm going to quickly move you guys to the other side of my screen. But yeah, so I have a multitude of jigsaw puzzles. And on my website, it's kind of like a little gallery slideshow where you can see each jigsaw puzzle on its own. And there wasn't any particular way of organizing this. whenever I create these GIFs, once I have a whole bunch of them, I would just have them all be slapped into one file. And yeah, you know, some of them are repeated just to give that illusion of, you know, having that overwhelming feeling that we all have just in life. But yeah.
Cool. So then, like, how do you decide what to include and what to create?
Yeah, so since I am Asian American, or more specifically Filipino American, you know, the topic that I touch on are my two cultures. And, you know, I find myself struggling with, you know, balancing these two cultures because of how different they are. You know, for Filipino culture, at least in my family, you know, my parents really value like respect and, you know, just being together. So we are together a lot of the time and we do a lot of things together. And, you know, versus in America, or like the American culture, it's more focused on like individualism and independence. And so having those two values, they're quite different. And it's really hard to balance those two since they're so opposite from one another. And, you know, I find myself like it's just a challenge for me to have these two cultures growing up here with my Filipino parents. And it's, you know, I have lost confidence within myself growing up because I want to make sure I'm doing the right thing, but you know, other people's feelings and how they are a part of my life, it makes it challenging for me to decide on what to do for any decision, really. So to, you know, to shorten it up, it's basically just touching on my struggles within these themes of my cultural background.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and then Ryan put in the chat, do you want to share how we can find your website? You
Oh,
have
of
a
course.
piece. Yeah, you have a piece in the gallery right now, but yeah, your website I think is more.
Mhm. Yeah, well, if you guys would like to follow along with this little tour of my page, you can always scan this QR code. They're all present in each one of these jigsaw puzzles. But yeah, I can do a quick run through of my website if
Sure,
you
yeah.
guys would like. Yeah, okay. So if I go back to the home page, this QR code will take you to this page. And just note that the desktop version is a little different than the phone version. So just bear with me if you guys are following along. But if you scroll down a bit, you can see, you know, a whole bunch of GIFs that I created throughout the year. And I've labeled them in different categories. So there's social identity, my family identity, and personal identity. And the reason why I chose to do it that way is just, it's easier for me to identify how these GIFs, how these feelings have affected me, and I guess move forward, improve myself with like this whole idea of self-acceptance. But yeah, here are a few GIFs, and if you click on one of them, maybe I'll show you guys a different one. Let's see. I wanted to show a fun one. Oh, this one. Okay. So for this one, if you click through it, you will see my whole process. And these were like some characters that I drew for this one GIF. Or I guess there are a multitude of GIFs. Also, note that my Wi-Fi is a little slow, so my GIFs won't load. But there are 5 GIFs in this one. And I guess I could quickly show you this video of what it's about. It's also in another language as well. It's in Tagalog. But, you know, long story short, it's my uncle when he was younger. He was playing outside and he touched a generator with his hand and, you know, burnt his hand, and then they used tomatoes to cool it down. So I'll quickly play this video.
Start yung generator. Maingay kasi. Ano kaya? Punta sabi natin, hey, ayos ka dyan. Ginano ko, so out of curiosity, ginawa ka po ngayon, pinatch ko ngayon yung kung buhok ko pa rin yung hindi. Dahil pa ko, reddish na. Umiyak ako nung. Alam mo, yung naririnig ko, habang ako yung iyak. Ayan, sabi na sa'yo. And then, nag-cut sila ng tomato and then place nila dito sa ibabaw. Aba, ang lamig. Nung nagtataga, hawak ko, tinitingnan ko yung palad ko. Nakakagaling pala itong kamatis.
Yeah, so that was a little interview animation that I had with my uncle. But finally, okay, these just loaded, but I basically just took little keyframes of my animation and then made them into GIFs and put them into Procreate to alter the colors so they match my whole jigsaw puzzle. But yeah, there's also, you know, more GIFs that you could look through as well. But I can move on to my main page, which is, yeah, again, it shows the whole multitude of my jigsaw puzzles and then my artist statement, if you guys would like to read that as well. But yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
All right. So I think I'm going to loop back around. If we have extra time, I can work through some other questions. But Nathan, if you want to step up and talk for a bit.
Yes, hello, hi. My name is Nathan Wilkinson. I primarily work in photography in the darkroom context, but I also do a bit of digital and film work. I can share my screen with you really quick. Oh, pardon my desktop. It is horrific. Okay. So at the beginning of the year, well, do you just want me to go in and start talking about my work and my process and everything, or do you have like very specific things you want me to talk about?
Not at all. You are free to talk about whatever you want.
All right, sweet. So at the beginning of the year, I really knew I wanted to work with photography. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do digital work or get back into my darkroom techniques. So I took out my camera when I was forced into quarantine and I started making imagery, specifically self-portraiture, focusing on the body in motion and layering imagery of my body in motion, merging them together to create kind of abstract forms. And during my time in quarantine, I realized that I missed working in the darkroom because that's where my roots were in photography, was in the darkroom. That's like a second home to me. So I knew I wanted to get back in there. I'm trying to go to the next image, 1 second. There we go. Here's another image from quarantine when they were picking me up to take me back home. This image influenced my work because I was trying to think about how I could use the camera and the photograph as a lens to look through something and into a new place, thinking about the camera as a portal. And I think this really this peephole image really captures this idea of a portal. It's alienating, it's taking you to this new place. And then I was also trying to like expand upon this idea of painting with light and dancing with the camera. So I used my iPhone camera and did long exposures, and I just moved my hand up and down, side to side, maybe twisting it. And depending on how fast or slow I was moving, it would give me different colors. So slower motions gave me this orange, red, yellow color palette. And if I was moving really fast, it was more of this putrid green, like really gross color. So these are curtains in my room, actually. These ones behind me at night, they were illuminated by an orange light. So it kind of created this landscape, and this imagery kind of feeds into what my darkroom body of work is discussing. So I made wood sculptures a couple years ago, and I needed to figure out how I could utilize them in a better way than just putting them on a pedestal. So I started making photograms in the darkroom, which I placed the sculpture directly on top of silver gelatin paper, which is a light sensitive material. And I exposed it to light with an enlarger and then developed the paper. And it recorded these ghostly forms of the sculpture. And then I was like, okay, well, this is cool, but it's very static. How can I make this a little more interesting? So I started taking sculptures, and rather than doing just direct contact prints, I elevated it off the paper at varying degrees, and I would do multiple exposures at like half a second or like 0.2 seconds. And I would just layer imagery of sculptures. And that brings me to, well, sorry, this is another body or piece of work from more sculptures. It kind of creates this neural, medical, psychedelic type of imagery, which is now where I was going to go, which is, this is where it's led me. So using these photograms, I go into Photoshop and I mirror and layer imagery I flip it vertically and horizontally and merge them together in Photoshop to create these like patterns. It's kind of decorative, but it still has like bodily and medical imagery to it. Yeah, so this is a photograph I made from a wood sculpture in the darkroom, and it's been transformed through digital processes to create this new pattern. And I will ultimately take this on for the final body of work and print it on scrim and turn the photograph more into a installation work, and thinking about how I can take two-dimensional imagery and turn it into a physical space. So yeah, that's a quick summary of what I've been up to. I can answer any specific questions though.
Sweet. No, that's really cool. Thank you. You kind of pretty much answered a lot of the questions that I had for you already. I guess the only other question that we can kind of go over is like, how do you decide like what to make? Like why do this particularly?
Mm-hmm. Okay. It's a great question. Why this? My work is pretty conceptual. I work intuitively. I love shadow and light, and I was very intrigued with this idea of painting with light. And I was kind of using my sculptures as a paintbrush in a sense, painting with light by allowing it to like light to transfer through these wood sculptures onto paper. So it's very like deeply process based. I start with like being interested in the merging of processes, and then thinking about, okay, what does it mean to merge things together and layer? and why am I so interested in abstraction? That's something that I've been contemplating. And sorry, I'm kind of like all over the place.
You're
I
good.
guess my quick answer, my work is most interested in understanding abstraction and using abstraction to explore structures of consciousness. Because I think in order to understand something that is abstract, to be able to abstract things and analyze abstraction, we need to have consciousness. We need to have a body, and we need to be conscious of the world in order to abstract things. We need to have experiences, and we use those collective experiences to abstract things, if that makes any sense. That's what I'm trying to explore, though. That's what I'm trying to like articulate. I think there isn't a definitive answer to the work necessarily, because it's an exploration of consciousness and abstraction.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's very cool.
Yeah.
Ryan mentioned, so the works that you have right now for the BFA show in the VU gallery, 2 of them are actually self-portraits. Are those like a similar process, or?
Yeah, so with those 2 images, those were also started from photograms. I set up a tall piece of foam core board, and I taped silver, it was 16 by 20 inch silver gelatin paper. I taped that to the board, and I just stood right up next to it, basically put my face against the paper and tilted the enlarger head back so light would be projecting out into the room rather than straight down. And it left my silhouette on the paper. And then using the wood sculptures, I varied the distance away from the paper and the light, and casted the shadows of it onto the undeveloped silhouette. So it created this merging of my body and the wood sculptures. And then once they were developed, I took them out and brought them into Photoshop, which I did a mixture of processes, kind of doing some digital solarization or composite negatives. So like taking an image, making it a positive, combining those 2. And then with that new image, I would create a new negative or in positive and merge those. And it was just this process of layering imagery, positive and negative. Yeah, that's how I got those pieces. And I think those were informed by the imagery that I was working on like early within the quarter, like that body in motion image. There's been this tie of movement and that's what I have to say about those images.
Cool. All right. And yeah, so for anybody who hasn't seen them yet, this was the last day to see them. They are going to be online. So, I mean, no worries if you missed it. You can see them online at the virtual VU site. Oh, and then Sasha in the chat had a question about what happens to the wood sculptures after you use them for these pieces.
I keep them. I'm still trying to figure out how I can bring the wood sculptures out in into the gallery space without just putting them on a pedestal, because that is has a very sterile feeling to it, I think. So I want to continue utilizing them in the future. I would like to explore how I can bring them into the gallery and project light through them to cast shadows into space, and using the sculpture to form space with shadow, essentially. So just some future plans for those. I definitely want to continue working with wood sculpture and sculpture in general to make images. Yeah.
Very cool. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mads.
So I'll stop sharing. There we go.
Sweet. All right. Mads, you're up.
All right. Trying to share my screen. Let me make sure I'm on that. 1 second.
You're good.
some reason it's not letting me share my screen. Let's just see if I can do this real quick. There we go. All right. So I work with sculpture. Namely, I do a lot with paper mache, and this year I've chosen to focus on fabric, and I'm really interested in space, especially since the start of COVID and quarantine. Our spatial orientation has just been like discombobulated and continues to be so, it seems like every 30 seconds. And the reorientation that we've had to have around space, to me, has, I just have felt the need to focus on it because it's been so heavily affecting me. And yeah, so I decided to focus on that for the BFA because I'd made other works previously in past quarters, and I thought this would be like a good wrap up. Namely, for this, my jumping off point was this theory called the habitus, and it's a sociological term used to describe how our living conditions act as enablers or constraints within developing and enacting different lived experiences. So it's kind of just explaining how every part of our environment affects how we perform. And to me, it's been a concept that is really grounding and it makes a lot of sense, but I feel the need within my works to take these really big and conceptual ideas and create them into a 3D entity in order to understand them more. And through the process of creating, I feel like I gain a better understanding. These are pictures of something I made at the end of last quarter. It was this giant fabric installation. I don't really know the exact size, but it was around like 11 feet by, it was like 8 or 9 feet tall. And you could walk all around it and in it. And the process for this is I dip strips of fabric in water, and then I coat it in a cornstarch or wheat flour paste, and then I adhere it to one another. In this image, you can see there's a freestanding wall, and I welded together metal supports and used baling wire as well to attach them together. And yeah, and then I also took casts of my body and put them into this sculpture as well. You can kind of see it in like one of the corners. And yeah, just really focusing on the body and how we move in space. And then this is an image, not the best image, but one of the only ones I have of the VU show. And the fabric that I used in this was a part of the one I made at the end of last quarter. And I've kind of just I'd made 2 installations before that, and I'm just continuously reusing the fabric and reapplying them to make additional installations. And that's what I did here. I had taken pre-made fabric segments and just hung them up. And with the help of Parisa, we hung them up in the VU. And yeah, just like made a new exploration of space out of pre-found or like pre-made fabrics. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. I have some more pictures of your
Yeah.
piece in the gallery if you want me to share them.
Yeah, that would be great.
Awesome. Okay, let me pull them up. In the meantime, though, why don't you talk about like why, so you talked about kind of inhabiting space and how that's been kind of recontextualized with COVID and everything. So how do you decide kind of where things go?
Like the fabric segments?
Yeah.
Just kind of, I'm really interested in negative space and taking advantage of negative space as well. Like in this one, you can see how you can, sorry, my cat keeps moving everywhere. But yeah, so you can see through the individual segments, and yeah, I'm really interested in that negative space interaction, especially the idea of if one viewer was going to be moving through it, another viewer would be able to see them on the other side, and then that might inform how they move and perform around the installation. So yeah, taking advantage of the negative space, and then also light, seeing how like the transparency works in it. And yeah, I just honestly with this one, I have like a pile of different fabric segments, and I took the ones off the top, and which happened to be the biggest ones. And then I started by hanging the one in the back, and then we hung the one in the front in orientation that made sense and so that you could see through it. And yeah, it was just kind of like navigating the space that it was in and navigating the VU gallery and just hanging it how we thought made sense. And yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
So still have a couple minutes for your little section. Are there any particular pieces of like feedback or advice that you found like super influential and inspiring?
Yeah, so something that's always really stuck with me is Sasha once described, I don't know if it was to me personally or to a class I was in, but described sculpture and like making sculpture as a dance. And to me, that has just been really influential in like how I choose to make, and also just the idea of movement and moving around a piece. And it really is so rhythmic, especially with like the process of dipping in water and then dipping in the paste and then hanging. It becomes this like rhythmic thing that I don't even really have to think about. And then I can think about like the concepts that I'm trying to portray, or like just like anything really. And then Ryan pointed out to me last quarter how like heavily process based and material orientated I have become, and like always keeping that in the back of my mind is something that I try to do and like bring to the forefront of the work as well.
Very cool.
Also, taking Tammy Landis's performative viewership class just like really like
That was an amazing class. I remember that one.
yeah.
So Ryan in the chat just said, you talk about the aspect of your work that seems central, the interactive element. So you're making the experiential spaces more than static objects.
Yeah, so I'm definitely trying to make like the viewer interaction the highlight of the work, and make that what actually like activates the work and makes it art. I don't think that these would be art without viewer interaction, and I don't think they'd really be anything without it, especially since I'm trying to convey like a concept about like human performativity and social interaction. Like you really need the viewer in the work and in the space and interacting. And I'm hoping that as different people interact with it, that becomes like at the forefront of their brains. And yeah, just the idea that we are so heavily influenced by the spaces that we inhabited, and also vice versa, that the spaces take on a different meaning as we enact it and as we like, yeah, are within the space as well.
Yeah, and I don't know if you can tell, I'm going to share again so you can see it, but pretty much all of your pieces, especially the one in the gallery that's up right now, you can walk through it, you can kind of be inside of it. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. All right. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
I think that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Cool.
Sorry about my cat. He keeps running everywhere.
That is the space that we inhabit on Zoom.
Yeah. It's the cat territory. It's his space.
For sure. All right. Well, thank you. So Brittany, are you ready to share?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Brittany. I work in painting and a little bit of mixed media. I can share my screen to show some work that I've done. So this is kind of what I was working on last quarter. Kind of experimenting with mixed media, and I wanted to create a body of work that kind of represents the different aspects of Korean culture and my Asian identity. So I was really influenced by Korean fabric in traditional dresses, as well as jewelry and patterning. In this one, I was experimenting with portraiture, and portraiture is also an interest of mine and a skill set that I want to include and somehow combine with my concept, and also speak about the importance of Asian identity. Same with this last one. It kind of also has a traditional pattern seen in Korean temples where there's designing of the temple flower, and I kind of want to include that. And then here's an image of what I'm currently working on. I decided to stick with the temple flower design and kind of abstract that, change some of the colors and stylize it so it kind of like represents my own identity. I have some of the embroidery in the eyes down here that kind of represents a negative aspect of Asian identity that I kind of relate to, which represents my personal emotions regarding Asian discrimination and experience that contrasts with the beautiful cultural patterns that you see in the background here.
Cool, thank you. And then I have some pictures that I took of your pieces that are in the gallery right now. I can go ahead and share those if you'd like.
Yeah.
Cool. They're not edited because I haven't gotten around to it yet, but this is what is currently up now and will be online on the virtual site. So do you want to talk about like your process of creation? Like where do you start and where do you go from there?
Yeah, so I kind of chose 3 aspects of Korean culture that I want to focus on, which includes the fabric of the traditional dresses, the national flower of Korea, and then the temple design. And I kind of structured it in a composition that works well with portraiture. And I kind of just like worked with the composition of how the figure relates to these designs and how I can make them like intertwine with them, but also integrated so it's like cohesive in a way.
Cool. Ryan said the work you included in the video gallery were works on paper. The works you showed just now were more recent ones. Do you want to talk about the difference between them?
Yeah, so those recent ones were mostly experimentation and kind of like seeing which one I gravitated to. And I worked a lot with molding paste, incorporating beading with acrylic paints. And that kind of shifted in what I want to represent now, which is kind of simplifying and focusing on one of them, which is the temple flower. And I was also gravitated towards the molding paste and that kind of texture. So a lot of my experimentation was working with like mixed media, and I thought that really represented how these designs can like pop out and kind of like emphasize my cultural designs that I have like a personal connection with. So
Very cool. So do you have any like goals for any future work that you would like to do? You mentioned that you're kind of gravitating towards certain areas. Is there anything that you like want to do professionally?
I think maybe trying to like continue this kind of work and seeing how I can like take it further. And I found certain areas that I've been working well with producing these kind of designs and seeing how I can like stylize them, but also abstract them into like that speaks to like how I want to represent my own culture and stuff like that.
Cool. Is there any kind of piece of advice or influential artists that you are inspired by? Aside from what you've discussed about like the fabrics and flowers.
Yeah. I had some good advice from Seiko that she works a lot with fabrics and she suggested doing some embroidery. And since I wasn't going to stick with the figure and doing portraiture anymore, she said I could still do that, but maybe just keep like the eyes and like work with it with like a different kind of material other than like painting it. So I thought like sticking with the eyes was like a really strong representation of identity, because now since like COVID and we're all wearing masks, like eyes is all we see. So I thought that would be like a really strong portrayal throughout my work.
That would be very cool to see, especially with your like incorporation of the fabrics that you've already done. I think that'd be really cool. Is there anything else that you especially wanted to talk about that we didn't touch on?
I think I got everything.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you for sharing. And who is next? Ellie.
Hi, I'm Ellie. I don't have anything to share, but like screen-wise, but I can start talking about like the work I'm making.
I have photos of your work if you want me to share them.
Sweet, that would be awesome.
Cool. All right, let me find them. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and your work, okay. That's totally fine.
So I am primarily a painter and a printmaker, and those are the two mediums that I'm focusing on for my BFA work. And conceptually, like when the year started, I was kind of having like a difficult time trying to find like a narrative that felt like true to my culture and my heritage. And I finally, like, after so much exploration through like family photos and just objects, I landed on Japanese dolls. And it's been really, really interesting to kind of see the tie-ins between like the very cultural and traditional aspects of these dolls and like kind of how I view my relationship with my Japanese heritage and culture. So this doll on the left is a kokeshi doll, and these dolls have like the meaning and the original intention of them is not completely known. But like for me growing up, like I've always been attached to Japanese culture in a way that is very surface level. And so like I've only really been attached to it by means of like food or just like objects. Like, I don't know, just like kind of cheesy stuff like that. And so kokeshi dolls, like they were so cute to me when I was little, and I would just like beg my parents. I remember there was like one specific kokeshi keychain that I was like, I have to have it. Like, I need this. And I feel like it's like pretty representative of just how it feels to be someone who is like Japanese American and like growing up in America with no real attachment to this like very traditional culture. And so it's just like, oh, like I feel like, especially growing up, I feel like I like always needed a certain type of attachment to call myself Japanese. So yeah, that's the Kokeshi one. And both of these, I should say, are done with airbrush, with acrylic paint. That's been a process that has been really fun to me. And it is a medium that I'm starting to lean a little bit out of in the current work that I'm making, but it has like really informed my process a lot. And so this doll is a Hina doll, and one of the holidays, like pretty much the only holiday that I had grown up like celebrating. I don't even know if celebrating is the right word, but my dad would just be like, Happy Girls Day. Sorry, I'm reading the chat. So the Girls' Day is a holiday in Japan that is basically like it's like the celebration of kids and young girls specifically. And so on March 3rd, that day, it's like an altar of dolls, I would say. And it's like a set of steps pretty much with these dolls displayed out, and the dolls are basically set out for protection of the young girls in the family, which I thought was really interesting. So yeah, those are the two paintings that I have in the VU gallery.
Cool. And then are you currently in your studio right now?
Yeah, I am. I can show you, I can like move my camera and show you the paintings I'm working on now.
If you're comfortable
I'm
with that,
working, yeah, that'd be fun. I'm working at a much larger scale now. I'm working on two paintings that are 3 feet by 5 feet. And I'm like, the paintings I have in the VU are just airbrush, but I've switched to like going back and forth between painting and airbrushing. So this is one of them. The angle's kind of weird. I don't know how to adjust it. But this is also a Hina doll. It's a little more detailed than the one I have in the VU, a lot more detailed. And then this is, let me walk over. Can you see that? Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is an Ichimatsu doll, which is, it's a doll that basically looks like a young girl. And in my research of it, it's, so like after World War II, Japan sent out these dolls as like a signifier of friendship to other Western countries, which was really interesting. I was like, why would you send a doll? But yeah, it's a really interesting signifier of just like culture and heritage and tradition in Japan.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing.
Totally.
So can you talk about kind of your work process?
Yeah, for sure. I work like designing the sketches for my paintings. I work digitally, and so for the paintings in the VU and the paintings I'm working on right now, I basically find like different stock photos of like a specific doll I want to use, and then just like distort it a ton in Photoshop and Procreate and just like form a composition I like. And lately I've really been like really trying to distort the dolls so you can't even tell what they are and like really abstract them. And yeah, so after I like design the sketch digitally, I basically just like paint what I see in the sketch. I don't like there isn't a lot of room for movement like within the painting itself.
Gotcha. So does the distortion have like a significant like impact to yourself, or is it just more dynamic?
For sure, it definitely is just kind of a visual thing, but for me the distortion is like very representative of what it feels like to be connected to a heritage that you have no real tangible connection with. And so you're always kind of looking at it from different angles, and like you can be really hesitant to call it your own. And there's just like, there's basically an over analyzation of it. And so that's what I'm trying to get at with the distortion in the paintings.
Cool. Well, thank you for sharing that as well. So talked about your process, talked about, the influence. What do you have any kind of future goals aside from, or like kind of beyond what you're working on right now?
I guess like future goals is I just want to keep painting. That's like all I want to do. So yeah, I'm just really trying to paint as much as I can. I used to do a lot of printmaking, but now it's like I felt like I've really found my niche with painting, and I just want to do it all the time. So it's not like a professional goal. It could be, but yeah, I just like painting.
You know what? That's fair. Sometimes that's all you really need.
Yeah.
So are there any other artists or any piece of advice that you've gotten that you've been really inspired by?
Yeah, I was talking with Seiko earlier this quarter, and she mentioned something like the subject matter that I'm using is always going to be interesting to an American or a Western eye just because of what it is. And that like really hit the nail on the head for me because I've always been like really hesitant in using Japanese imagery in my artwork just because there is so much cultural connotations and traditions associated with it. So it's like I've never wanted to like delve into making like anime art because there is like this certain way that the Western eye looks at art coming from Japan and just like Japanese culture and Japanese people in general. And like I've been really hesitant to kind of approach it because I don't want to take part in like the infantilization of Japan and stuff like that. That's like always stuff that's going on inside my head. But when Seiko told me that, I was like, oh, that it like really changed how I look at dealing with this subject matter.
That's very cool. This is an aside, but that's funny that you mentioned that because I actually was doing a lot of research on kind of the Western eye, like viewing a lot of popular Japanese culture, and the infantilization was a big part of it. So it's interesting that you brought that up. That's very cool.
Yeah, I took Julia's, it was like, what was it? I think it was a Japanese art history course.
Yeah.
And she talked a lot about that. And I was like, damn, like that's crazy. Like that's insane. But yeah, super interesting to me.
Very cool. Well, again, thank you for sharing. Was there anything that you wanted to talk about extra?
Nah, I think that's everything.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks again.
Thank you.
Who is next? Okay. Working through. All right. Priest, it looks like you just got here, so I want to come back to you.
Oh my Lord.
Eli, are you
Yeah,
ready?
I'm here. Yeah. So my camera is unfortunately not working, but I am here.
No worries.
Yeah. So
do you have any imagery that you want to share, or do you want me to share some of mine?
yeah, you can share yours. I don't have great pictures of my pieces.
That's okay. Neither do I. They're not edited yet, but
it's all good.
So that we can look at it.
At least it's a picture, right?
Yeah. All right. So go ahead and introduce yourself and your work, and then I will pull up some of my stuff.
My name's Eli. I am a mixed media artist. I have like last quarter up until kind of midway end of last quarter. I was thought that I was going to be working more kind of with 2D art for the BFA, and then I started working really heavily with ceramics, and I got really into it, and so that's kind of now my focus. But yeah, I'm working with like functional pottery, and my kind of thematic ideas have been pretty consistent. Working with ideas of like queer relationships and community, and like my identity as a trans person. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. Okay, great. So these works, do you want to talk about kind of your process in creating these?
Sure. So these particular works were also pretty influenced, at least in like the surface decorating technique by Kathy King, who's a ceramicist based in Ohio. But anyway, these were all hand-built pieces. None of these were built on a wheel. The plate has some kind of applique effect. Sorry, I don't really know how to describe my process. It's pretty straightforward hand building stuff. The illustration on it is a sgraffito technique where there was like a wax resist to allow me to kind of layer the different colors. And the black parts are kind of inlaid to have a sort of texture effect. It's all like underglaze painted though. So yeah.
Sweet. And then you mentioned kind of your inspiration behind the pieces. I'm kind of especially interested in this piece, the tech. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, so this picture has a portrait of Jeff Bezos on it and a nice little talk bubble from him basically indignantly being like, how could I possibly, give my workers living wages and bathroom breaks when I got to cut costs to make Amazon carbon neutral by the time it's far too late for that. So yeah, I work with sometimes kind of political themes in my work. This is just, yeah, one example of that. Really hate that guy. He's not a good dude.
So why do you work with this kind of imagery? Like what inspires you to create this stuff?
Well, so I'm interested in the kind of like craft versus art dichotomy that exists, and that's been something that I've been kind of like thinking about since before I was even working in the BFA. And so the kind of like confrontational political maybe even like anti-assimilationist in some aspects with like the queer themes, like that sort of theme and imagery with in combination with this kind of like this medium that isn't necessarily always perceived to be like a fine arts medium. I don't know, it just has it references the kind of DIY kind of ethos that I think is just, it's a draw to me and to my like ties to like queer community. Yeah, that's kind of how it's all coming together for me.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of like interconnection between DIY and like kind of punk influence, which I think is cool.
Mhm.
What kind of professional goals do you have or future goals with your work that you'd like to pursue?
Well, like I said, I'm a mixed media artist, so I kind of do a lot of everything, and I plan to continue doing that. Most of my practice is like illustration based, including I would say my ceramics practice. So probably continuing in that direction, just however I can and however I feel like fits my artistic visions, I suppose.
All right, well, cool. So is there, I mean, it sounds like you're very inspired by your community and kind of where you fit into the world. Do you want to talk about, is there anything like in particular that like really, really, I don't know, gets you?
I mean, something that I'm coming back to a lot throughout my BFA and kind of maybe not struggling to articulate, but like it's kind of being diffused through my work is this idea of like the social reproduction of transness and how trans people we kind of like teach each other how to like move through the world in a way that's very highly, I don't know, it's just difficult. So I don't know, just like the aspects of community that like are very care oriented and yeah, that's really something that like is at the heart of my work for sure. And I don't know if it necessarily comes across in everything, but it definitely is like the whole like doing functional ceramics and like having this sort of reference to like a domestic setting and like somewhere that you'd be with your family or like people who are close to you, like that's definitely a reference to that. So yeah.
Very cool. So how does this kind of translate into your future work? Like, what are your plans for, say, like the Western Gallery show?
So I'm planning on doing a sort of table setting installation. Like I said, in a sort of domestic setting. I'm planning on incorporating some screen printing and also some textile work into that installation to create a kind of like almost like a living room or like dining room, I guess. My living room and my dining room have always been the same room, so it's the same word to me. But yeah, so kind of like a table with plates and dishes and potentially some other like ceramic objects on the floor and around, just kind of creating a space that feels lived in.
Cool. So I guess the last piece that I have is, I don't know, I feel like we can talk more about your kind of physical process of creation.
Mhm.
You talked about the technical aspects of what you're doing. Do you want to talk any more about that, or?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of moving away from hand building. I'm doing more slip casting and wheel throwing now. I'm sure that I'll do more hand building this quarter, but it just hasn't really been my focus. So there's definitely like cleaner quality to a degree to my more recent work. A lot of it is like ceramics is kind of a long process. So a lot of it is kind of in the intermediate stages right now or very beginning stages. So we'll see, but so far it's looking a lot like cleaner in general. So yeah.
Cool. What other kind of mediums do you work with?
I do a lot of like just like 2D painting, illustration, basically any like wet or dry media that you can do on paper or canvas. Like I have tried to work with and I enjoy painting mostly. But yeah, gouache, watercolor, acrylic, that all that. I'd work with textiles a lot. I do sewing, crochet, soft sculpture, but for the most part, I'm trying to focus on like illustration and ceramics right now. And I've done some animation and stuff too, but yeah.
Sweet. So cool. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about, or?
Not really. I think you pretty much covered it.
All right, cool. Well, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
I think I see that we are now joined by the rest of our team. Hello, hello. Glad you guys could make it. I think, let's see, who's next? I don't know. I kind of picked on Parisa as she came in, but I don't know if she's still here. I don't know.
Yeah.
Alan, do you want to go? Oh my God. Sorry, Parisa. I don't know why I didn't see you.
No, it's all good. If Alan wants to go too, like, I'm okay. It doesn't matter on the order.
Parisa, you can go. Let's just go Parisa and then Alan.
Sounds good. Sorry, the Wi-Fi in the studios is not so good. But do you have any images, or should I pull up images?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, that'd be cool.
So I've been asking you guys to kind of introduce yourselves and like your work and what you like, your process and creation and inspiration and stuff like that.
Gotcha. I'm working primarily on paper with gouache and watercolor and a little bit of mixed media like tea wash. And I'm gonna start incorporating things like maybe gold leaf and other traditional elements like saffron or other spices as well. And in the image you guys see on the screen, these are two pieces that are kind of inspired by kind of a flow of memory. And within that flow of memory, there's my life and my experiences in Iran and symbols that are accompanying that, and also just influences of being Iranian in the diaspora and what that means. So I have depicted rugs and other symbols like pomegranates and goldfish, which are very symbolic for Persian New Year. And there's an absence of the figure in these pieces, just to be able to focus on the symbols themselves. And I've also been emulating the vibrant color palettes that exist within these symbols as well throughout my work.
Sweet, thank you. Do you want to talk about kind of like where you start in a piece and kind of your creation process?
Yeah, absolutely. I usually start with like a rough idea of the kind of symbols I want to be using. Then I start gathering images. So I start gathering images of, or I contact family to send me pictures of their rugs, and I take pictures of my own rugs. And then once I have all my images gathered, and as well as doing some sketches, I then start working on the larger piece. And a lot of it will be drawn out and mapped out beforehand, but some of it will come intuitively, like in an area that's not filled. I'll be like, oh, this is where some text belongs. Oh, there could be some overlapping that could happen here. And I'm learning through those processes where like I can utilize those layering and different things to my benefit in future works, so I can see like what works and what's not working.
Sweet. So for kind of the details in these, so you mentioned that you asked your family and relatives for pictures of their rugs. Are all of the rugs like your family's rugs, or are there some of them just kind of random?
In this one, these are all, the one on the bottom is like based off a rug, but I didn't copy the design exact. And then the other two, the one that's like in both paintings, that is one of the rugs I have in my bedroom that I think we moved to the US with that rug. So that's a pretty, actually most of the rugs that we have, we moved to the US with. So they're pretty special. They're like reminiscent of like my childhood bedroom, all up until like my current bedroom, which is nice. But on the bottom of this one is one of my grandfather's rugs, and I changed the color palette a little bit, but the design is the same. And then same with the other rugs. The larger one that's like blown up is just like a detail shot. And yeah.
Cool. So Ryan was asking, can you talk about how the pieces in the view gallery have informed the new piece you're working on scale and inclusion of the figure?
So with scale, so from these pieces, I've kind of come to learn that some of these symbols need some space to breathe. So right now I'm working on a piece that will be later shown in the BFA exhibition that's 10 feet by 3.5 feet. And there's a lot more negative space. I'm utilizing a lot more negative space to allow these images to breathe, to kind of be appreciated for their intricacy and delicacy. And yeah, and I'm also kind of bringing in the figure now. And with the new work that I'm working with, I'm incorporating images from my childhood in Iran before we moved to the US, and then also images of us in the diaspora, whether it be like pictures of us in our, like when we first came to the US, or like even more recent pictures.
Awesome. So you seem pretty inspired by your family and kind of your heritage and stuff like that. Is that kind of your main focus in what you want to depict, or are you inspired by anything else?
I think right now it's my main platform, like coming to appreciate these parts of myself has been like a really important thing, especially in the past few years. Just especially with everything going on, you know, kind of like realizing what it means to grow up in the US as an Iranian American, and but also I'm able to explore like the aesthetic appreciations that I have, and imagery and symbols that are like so powerful and inspire me. And I think that through my art is like a very safe, it's like a safe platform for me to explore these narratives and talk about them.
Awesome. Do you have any, you talked about your goals for the Western Gallery show. Do you have any kind of professional goals for your art career?
Something about me, I like to do everything. I love ceramics, I love painting, I love drawing. I love like all sorts of art, even fibers, things like that. So I'm still like learning like what is, you know, what is my element. I think like right now I'm so infatuated with this detail work that is really exciting for me. And like Ryan just mentioned in the chat, that I gravitate towards like heavily detailed process oriented work. I think like the meditative aspect is really important. And I think like my mom always talks about like, oh, it's like in your genes, like, oh, like it runs in our family. Like my uncle, my late uncle was a calligrapher, and we have like other, on my dad's side, we have other artists and poets, authors, but just like appreciating the platform and opportunity that I have to make work like this in the collegiate setting is really big, because I know like a lot of them, like my uncle, for example, like no one, only we get to see his work. So it's really exciting to be able to share this with the larger.
Very cool. Well, thank you again for sharing. I love, you seem very like grateful. Like you have a lot of, I don't know, gratitude for what you do and the process in that. And I think that's very cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. So are there like a lot of, I'm assuming what you do is very intentional. You have a lot of like details that you work with. As far as like the placement and kind of what to incorporate, what is the thought process behind that?
So I do have my like baseline of like elements I want to incorporate, usually like the rugs and like the Islamic designs and symbols that I grew up with. And then like a really fun way to use technology lately for me has been like taking a picture of the work and then going on Procreate and then adding an image of something I'm thinking about adding, and seeing like if that's going to work with a composition. But another way I find my imagery is like I'll talk to family and think about like, for example, I was painting a section of my work that is kind of about Shab Yalda, which is the winter solstice celebration of Iran. And I was just on the phone with my mom while I was working on it, while we were talking about that celebration, I was reminded of other imagery that I wanted to incorporate and things like that. So it's like an ongoing conversation with myself, with my family, with literature, with language. Yeah.
Cool. Is there like a particular piece of feedback or advice that you found like helpful or inspirational?
Definitely. I'm just trying to think. Yeah, I have been absorbing like all of the feedback I've gotten from peers and faculty, and it's all been like very helpful. I am excited that I've been like inspired and kind of pushed to work larger, and then also go out of my comfort zone a little bit, because I definitely tend to be the kind of person who just like works very small and is very intentional with my work, and it's very detailed. But to be able to work on something so large where I'm like standing and walking around, and it's kind of like more physical and exciting for me.
Very cool. Well, thanks again for sharing. Was there anything that we didn't talk about that you would like to talk about?
Not that I can think of. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Alan, now you can go.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm ready to go. Are you sharing images right now, or
Either way, I've just been sharing in case you didn't have any, but if you would like to share, you are welcome to.
I didn't really prepare any images. I do have them on my computer, but yeah.
No worries. I got you.
Okay, sweet.
Go ahead and get started and then I'll pull them up.
Okay, so the works that I have in the gallery right now are kind of rooted in this recent like exploration into text and poetry and writing. So a big factor of it is this like compulsion to communicate or attempt to communicate. And one way that I try to do that is between the image and the text, and then the text and the texture. And even with the title, especially with these, the diptych, where it's, these two that were just shown, they even conversate with each other as well. So just kind of going back and forth between kind of like opposite ideas. Irony is kind of at the root of this work as well. Especially with this piece as well, there's also like an alchemical factor where it's like turning poop into gold as well, because I use this like gold pigment that I got at Valley Village, just kind of working with strange materials, 3D materials. And that's one thing that I do want to pursue further and push harder, is this kind of 3D element within my work. But it's pretty much limited to text in the on the works in the show. But yeah, I mean, the bad fucking artist is pretty apparent. You know, it's an acronym for BFA or whatever that word is. I'm ironically, I'm not very good at English as well. Like in high school, I failed English multiple times. I failed English in college. I'm not good at English. This is also like, I don't know, it's just interesting to take that into consideration as well. So yeah, it's just, that's kind of where this work is at. Trying to think, I kind of lost my train of thought. I don't know what else to add. There, I guess like some of the text is rooted in like it's born out of like intrusive thoughts, kind of. It's also rooted in like memory, trying to remember like childhood, things of my childhood. Like the Sonic paintings are kind of rooted to this game that the neighborhood friends and I would play, which was called Big People, in which we would create these characters and then act them out in these narratives that would, it was basically improv, but just we would be Sonic the Hedgehog characters acting out this like improvisational drama. Like I remember my character's name was Wolf. And I remember specifically, like there was this one time where we were playing and I died, and it was this whole big thing. So kind of like trying to elevate this silly, like these childhood icons. And like with this one, it kind of Sonic represents good, and then Shadow, the opposite hedgehog, represents evil or whatever. So it's like how we understand the world through narratives. The Bible is one of those narratives. I have a Mormon background as well, which is just this really strange religion. So yeah, just kind of lots of existential themes. It's kind of angsty. It's de-skilled intentionally. And with the text, I'm trying to have like a visceral reaction or make something that feels visceral. And yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed seeing these in person, just because of the kind of difference in textures. The visceral feeling comes through. So I was actually wondering, do you remember, because I don't think you can see it in this picture, but the title for this one actually references the game that you played.
Yes.
Which
yeah,
is
yeah.
very cool.
I definitely want, I take into consideration the title intentionally. So like, I think it can add a lot of context, and, you know, you can't control what the audience is, how they're going to interpret it, but it can at least guide them in like what my intent is and what I'm kind of thinking of. They can have any of their own, you know, connections. They can make any of their own connections to their own personal life, but, you know, it is directly referenced to my own experience. And a lot of my work is self-narrative, personal narrative. So I don't know, you know, we just came out of a critique prior to this, and we discussed some of my work that I'm making now. And I was like, whether I like it or not, it feels very Freudian. So I mean, I don't know. It's, yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah. You know what? That's okay. So do you want to talk about kind of your goals for the BFA show, or sorry, not the BFA show, but the Western Gallery BFA show, and kind of your future plans?
Yeah, so my goal is to get bigger with the surface, and to include more of my own text. Basically, I did a lot of writing of poetry over the summer, so I just want to kind of continue that and do more writing and incorporate that more explicitly in the work, and just taking up more surface area. Maybe even expanding off of the panel would be kind of interesting. I don't know. I mean, I kind of want to take a sculptural approach to this. Kind of, I mean, thinking of it more as like an object as well as something that interests me. But I also have paper that I want to do a series of like small paper works on like 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper, because that's traditionally like the size of computer paper. That's what I drew on a lot as a child. So, and kind of using materials that like are more oriented to like children's artwork, I guess, crayons, things of that nature. So maybe frame drawings of that, to, like, as like an aside. But yeah, that's kind of where my head's at, just bigger and more words.
Sounds like a pretty good general plan. So going back to your process of creation, Ryan mentioned that you mentioned the de-skilled kind of idea. So did you want to talk more about kind of what that means? And Ryan mentioned that you think some of the humor embedded in the work comes from the care and deep attention, these urgent or quick gestures. So just kind of overall, like what the process is for that.
Yeah, definitely. The process is, at least with the one piece that I'm working on right now, it has a lot of text and it's very small and it's very like, it's taking forever to do. So there's an element of a quick gesture, and then there's also the element of like a retentive, like handling of the material, trying to be very like finicky with it, especially with the sculptural material. Even if it looks like kind of weird, like I do put a lot of intent with each like application of whatever material it is I'm using. Like for instance, right now I'm using this, it is extra coarse pumice gel, and it's like kind of like cat litter mixed with like an acrylic medium. So I'm using that and like a palette knife, and I'm just like, it takes a lot of precision and care. So it's like a back and forth. And I have been working with projection a lot. So like I'll do these small works in like a sketchbook or over Photoshop or whatever, and then project it onto a larger surface. So it's kind of like with the content, it's like a back and forth, because I do want elements of like, this quickness, this expressiveness, along with like a very intentional attention to detail. So yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate the kind of conversation that's happening here, like in your pieces, not just in the meeting, because obviously we're having conversation. But
yeah, I am trying to create like a conversation where it's like two opposing forces trying to find some type of understanding. And that, I think as a result of that, that's where kind of the humor kind of lands, is this irony between the two forces. And like I said earlier, it is like angsty and kind of visceral or whatever. So, and I try to how I handle the materials also plays into the aesthetic factor of this angstiness.
Cool. So how do you talked about kind of your childhood inspiration influencing what you do now? How do you kind of decide what to incorporate in each piece?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess it's whatever is bothering me specifically at the moment. And also a lot of it is because it is like gestural or whatever. A lot of those connections are made after the fact as well. Like I just thought, it would be funny to do, Sonic. I just thought it would be funny to do Sonic, but then I was like, what role did Sonic play in my life? And then I was just able to, make those connections. So a lot of the intent comes after the fact, where it does come from this like unconscious side of myself, but that's still just as much of a, like sometimes ideas have you rather than you having ideas, like certain things just grip you. Like, I wasn't necessarily awake consciously when I was playing Sonic. But that's how I was like trying to make sense of the world, was through these hedgehog characters, and creating narratives out of it. And yeah, I think my work always comes back to this kind of narrative, this personal narrative that I'm exercising onto the panel. Because a lot of it is like specifically with one of these pieces right now that I'm working on is kind of like dealing with themes of trauma or whatever. So it's like, how do I, it's like also a process of confronting aspects of myself. And that's, it comes back to this kind of like therapizing, the self-therapizing of myself, where I'm going into like Jung's individuation process, trying to confront this like shadow aspect of myself and how to integrate it. And it is this like exercising of these things. And, that comes back to this communication. It's like communicating these things into the world.
That's very cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting to see this like happening, like as you work.
Yeah.
So was there anything that you particularly wanted to talk about that we didn't touch on?
No, not necessarily. I mean, yeah, I didn't have anything kind of prepared to ask anyone. I mean, for those who have seen it, like, I guess what was the reaction to the, the poop letters?
Yeah. I really hope, because this will be like online for public like viewing. I hope I get like an email about it. I want to be able to be like, yeah, that was on the wall.
Yeah, it is pretty grotesque.
I loved it. It's great. Well, thanks again for sharing.
Of course.
Okay. Colton, last but not least.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, I would love if you just shared the photos that you have.
Sweet. They're a little wonky because I was trying to find a good angle to get it, but we'll get through it.
I myself have tried taking photos of it, and something about the composition, it's a little elusive to cameras. But yeah, I guess I can introduce myself and my work. Yeah, hi, I'm Colton Sampson. I think as an artist, my two main interests are 3D modeling and a lot of like 3D and digital integrations of art, as well as installation art. I'm very interested in how people interact with art and the relationship to it as they engage with it. But at the same time, I'm very interested in kind of making biomorphic 3D digitally created pieces that talk about like that kind of have the language of both the body and the nature, kind of intermingling the two into something that feels a little bit foreign, feels a little bit absurd, but you just start to see hints of things you really kind of remember or understand in between what you don't.
Very cool. So looking through this, you mentioned the 3D modeling and stuff like that. Did you want to talk about like your process of creation for like these pieces and kind of how this came about?
Yeah, I think in the last couple years, I have been having a lot of fun and learning a ton about how to portray and how to display my work. I love like using these 3D programs. I think it gives me a lot of opportunity to really like push what I think the form could look like. Um, I think very three-dimensionally, and it makes me have a hard time like being satisfied with like writing down my ideas on paper. So I normally end up, yeah, going into these 3D modeling programs to work on it. Um, yeah, like this piece in particular, I was thinking like during the month or so that I created this, I was thinking a lot about death, and I was thinking a lot about reincarnation and the ends of our lives and the end of my own life, but like the continuation that I feel like we're a part of. And so I was creating a bunch of like 3D models that were bones and that were bone-like shapes, and then kind of building them up into things that were a lot more figural. Like the piece at the end, or the biggest feature of this group of five, is yeah, it starts to feel like it has a head, it starts to feel like it has shoulders. It's almost like arms reaching forward towards the candle. And yeah, but directly answering question of my process, I think it starts with the ideas that I was describing, and me wanting to work through it three-dimensionally, and then figuring out how do I want to like display it. And for this one, I wanted to make these physical things, so I went to the 3D printer, and I spent a lot of hours 3D printing these to bring these shapes kind of to life, kind of out of the digital realm and into the physical realm. Um, yeah, I wanted, like, with this sense of reincarnation, I wanted it low to the ground. I wanted it to be something you could walk around instead of it being on the wall. And so actually bringing it into 3 dimension really helped that possible.
Yeah, I'm familiar with your kind of 2D work and your digital work because you have another show with the View Gallery.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really cool to see it kind of come into like a physical aspect. Um, and and talking about the physical aspect, Ryan mentioned in the chat a big aspect of this piece and the major project is ephemerality. In this piece, he sees that the metaphor of the candle, he sees that in the metaphor of the candle. And so in your proposed work for spring, it is in that interactive component where everyone's experience will be individual and unrepeatable. So did you want to talk more about that?
Yeah. From this piece on to what is going to be in the Western Gallery, I think there's one big change while a lot of it is remaining the same. I love this kind of ephemeral, almost ethereal kind of visual language, like having elements of the body and elements of nature. And so that language is going to remain going into the Western Gallery, but the big change is I'm incorporating more of my interest in installation and interaction with the viewer. So the large sculpture that I'm going to be making for the Western Gallery will actually be interactive, and that like people will be able to engage with it. I will be projecting onto the sculpture, and those projections will mimic and dance with and interact with your own movement or the viewer's movement in front of the piece. So it really, yeah, it really starts to bring this like, not ephemeral, but like ethereal visuals into like your own interaction with the piece.
Very cool. I'm so excited for these installations in spring. So exciting. So going back to kind of like my list of questions. So we talked about your process. We talked about kind of your spring, like Western Gallery goals. So I guess a question that I have is, how do you decide like what to create? Like, why bones? Like, why this kind of idea of reincarnation?
I think a lot of the create is one based off of what I'm learning about and what I'm thinking about. I think while I was creating that piece, I was reading the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which I think death was something that I was really fascinated by. Not really in a macabre way, but almost like in like a just thinking about like the cycles of life, the ebbs and flows, and yeah, and how things change and how things cycle. And the language itself is kind of a lot more driven by my curiosity. I think a lot of how I make my art is based off of like what I get excited by when I'm like walking around in the world. Something that has been driving me recently is thinking about like when you were a kid and you would be walking through nature and you would see something kind of mundane, but it just like illuminated you and you got excited and you started to realize and notice all the details of it. And like maybe this leaf, you start to notice how it like has all these veins in it and different colors, and it became this whole new thing that was so much more than the leaf. It was this exciting experience and this whole new relationship that you had with this object. And yeah, I think thinking about that is what's driving a lot of my visual language. So I'm using bones, but it's yes, but it's kind of bringing back like me trying to reconnect with the curiosity about these objects. Like as a kid, if I saw a bone in a field, it would just become my obsession for the day. I'd be like, what the heck is this? Where's this from? And as you grow older and the more you see these same objects, the less and less discovering the object gives you a sense of curiosity. You know what it is. Maybe that's a hip bone. Maybe that's a shoulder. Oh, this is from a deer. You have so many more questions answered that you're a lot quicker to disregard or to set it aside and not kind of discover those elements that you found as a kid, because like you weren't searching for questions. And so with using language like a bone, I'm trying to obscure a lot of what we know while also leaving the visual language of what it is, so that it regains this like, what actually is this? Like, I know what it is. I know it's a bone, but how does it work? Where is it from? Yeah. Yeah. So I think, maybe in my later piece, I think I'm referring a lot more to like the language of water, the work that'll be in the Western Gallery. But yeah, I think a bone is just part of my like lexicon of items that bring this curiosity.
Yeah, it's so interesting to kind of like find an object and it seems simple, but like it just kind of ignites something in you. And that's really cool to see kind of expressed in your work. So you're inspired by kind of what you find everywhere. Is there kind of like another artist or something else that kind of makes you excited, or a piece of feedback that you found like really inspirational?
Yeah, I'm trying to think which element of that question I'm like gonna go off of. I do have some people that inspire me, and some feedback. Maybe I'll get to that part a little bit later.
It's like a dual question, so you could
Yeah,
answer
yeah.
whichever part you want.
Um, yeah, I think right now I have some interest or some artists that I'm really looking to. There's an artist named Marguerite Mo, which is a French artist, but she's been recently doing a lot of like almost abstract sculptural work that has this similar organic language, and her work stems from a very similar like curiosity and blending of like our different associations with things. So for me, that was like as I was already thinking about that, I discovered that work, and now it's becoming my obsession because as an artist, she's amazing, and like she's doing things like as she's making this work, she's also researching things like what does a mammoth what would a mammoth sound like, and doing scientific work and like how like to reconstruct vocal cords. um so like looking at her, it's like this gives me this inspiration that like, oh, having genuine curiosity is a way that you can drive your artistic creation, and that yeah, and then it doesn't have to be like just actually yeah, just that.
Yeah, I think a driving force of a lot of, I mean, what I do personally is just being curious about everything. And I think that's really important to kind of keep with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then the other part of the question was kind of advice or feedback that you found kind of influential.
I think one thing that one bit of feedback that I found very helpful recently was kind of asking me like what was the root um what was the root of like my idea that I'm coming across. I'm mainly thinking about the Western installation, and it is this integration of digital programming, and a physical installation. Um, there's an element of like what's going to be projected onto it, and that projected stuff has one visual language and adds an element, and the piece that's going to be physical adds its own language to it. And I'm noticing at times you can kind of get bogged down by like trying to juggle so many elements at once that like over the course of a year or over the course of like the 9 months that we've been working on this body of work, your ideas shift, your thoughts shift, and as you juggle these elements, you start to lose like what was the point or what you were really creating this all for. And so I think recently I was asked like, what was the root of why you're doing this? And it really made me think about how I really enjoy people interacting with art. And so it was making me think about the importance of creating the experience and the importance of maybe having other people get closer to a sense of curiosity. So yeah, it was a nice like realigning of what I wanted to do.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing everything. It was really cool to hear your inspiration behind what you do. Was there anything that you wanted to talk about that we kind of maybe glossed over, didn't talk about as much?
I think that was great. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Of course. Thank you guys so much for everything. So I do want to shout out Sasha, has been kind of flying off in the chat. Just so many wonderful comments just throughout the course of our time together. And then thank you to everybody else who was here today. Pierre, Ryan, of course. But yeah, big hearty thank you to everybody who shared their process, their inspiration, their goals for the future. In our last, few minutes together, I wanted to ask if anybody had any additional questions or if they wanted to share anything extra.
Could we get a shout out for Colton's next show?
Yeah, of course. I don't want to like detract from the BFA show, but yes, just really quick, it is up currently. It is a dual show with an old friend of mine. I'm gonna pull it up so you guys can see it. It is a lot of their 3D modeling, digital work. Sorry, brain stopped working. Been on the computer too much today. Pull it up so you guys can see it. But Colton, if you want to talk about that, go for it.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, I think it's been a recent development that I've made so much of my work into like these installation pieces and physical, and but my root is truly in 3D modeling, and so this gallery is just an awesome. This show is just a great detail of what yeah, what 3D modeling I've done, my kind of relationship with kind of ethereal imagery, this kind of world that doesn't feel fully human, but doesn't feel like anywhere else. Yeah, I'm partnered with another great artist. Yeah, so it's just a cool kind of collaborative piece just celebrating 3D modeling. I think 3D modeling is a style of art that is new to the scene, at least in the last maybe 10 years, maybe 5 years, but it's clearly gaining a lot of traction. A lot of people are interested into it. I mean, there are amazing programs out there that are free. So 3D modeling is becoming a very accessible form of art. If you have a laptop, you have the ability to create art at the same level and with the same tools as professionals, which is very appealing. And yeah.
Yeah, I think both of you are working in Blender.
Yes.
Which is very cool.
Yeah, it's really enjoyable to see what two people in the same program can do and how different it is.
Yeah, so very cool to see. Obviously, all of our previous shows and a bunch of virtual shows, like virtual exclusive shows, are available on the virtual VU gallery. So definitely check it out. I think Colton, Gooey, and I are planning another artist talk eventually. But yeah, definitely check that out when it's up. And then, of course, again, we are at time. And this has just been such a wonderful experience. Thank you so much, everybody who shared. Again, big shout out to Ryan Kelly for being the best BFA coordinator. All right, so I'm gonna let everybody go. Thanks again. And yeah, check out the show. Hopefully it'll be
Thank
up
you, Reese.
later today. Yeah, of course. Thank you.